welcome back to this week's episode of AMA Friday with Amy Miller, recruiting in yoga pants. So let's talk feedback. We've absolutely had this conversation before on the channel. I'm probably repeating myself a little bit here, but there's always such interesting discussions around this and the perception of hiring teams, the perception of lawyers in HR, the perception of candidates and recruiters, and why don't we throw in the opinions of thought leaders while we're at it? Everybody feels some kind of way about this topic. And I want to just help reframe the conversation a little bit, because there are going to be things that you cannot control. As a job seeker, as someone on the receiving end of interview invites, sending out resumes, whatever it might be, you're not going to change a company policy. If you apply to a big corporation that has a no feedback rule, guess who's not getting feedback? Most likely, right? You might be able to tease out some high level insights or things like that. But again, there's going to be processes that, we even internally can't change. I would love to give people feedback, but I also recognize the limitations and the importance of following the rules. Mostly. Usually. Okay, let's discuss. So here's the scenario I want to run by you, okay? Because here's what I know to be true, and this might come as a surprise to some of you. Hopefully not. But feedback is highly, highly subjective and dependent on three things. You ready for this? The company, the role, and the team. So those are the three things that feedback can be impacted by. So I have a certain company that may have a certain list of expectations or culture fit questions or something that's specific to that organization, what they need, the questions they're asking, the information they want to get that shows a fit for an organization. That's number one. Secondly, the team, we'll put team second. This particular organization might need a very specific something, right? Maybe it needs an engineer that works on certain scope of things, or certain deliverables have to be met, right? So there's going to be kind of the team need, the team norms, the team expectation that informs feedback. And finally, the role specifically. So this is where we get into like the real technical details, right? Is this person senior enough or not senior enough or whatever? So we could come up with examples all day long around that, but keep in mind the feedback that you may or may not receive is going to be targeted to company, team, and role. So here's another way to look at this, okay? Let's say you are an okay recruiter, maybe even the world's okayest recruiter, and you're happily recruiting away at a company like, let's call them Microsoft, okay? So you're a recruiter at Microsoft, doing your thing, and you get a call from another company, big tech company. Let's call them Facebook. All right, so let's say that Facebook calls our okay recruiter and invites them to interview, all right? So recruiter goes, has those conversations, meets lots of people, gets lots of information, shares lots of information, and then fast forward some time, and recruiter unfortunately doesn't get feedback, but is able to piece together by the lack of responses that they're not getting an offer. It happens, no problem. But here's the question. Should our okay recruiter be worried about Facebook's interpretation of their background, skills, and experience? How would feedback from Facebook help our recruiter do better for the next interview? And maybe that interview is at a company like, let's call them Google. Would the feedback from Facebook in any way impact our recruiter's experience interviewing for Google? Very different companies. Some similarities in the role, both being recruiters. Teams are completely different, working on very different initiatives. So what would our recruiter learn from that Facebook feedback that would help them with the Google interview? I can't think of anything, because I would tell this recruiter, who may or may not be named Amy, that what Facebook learned about you didn't solve what they were trying to solve with this role. For whatever reason. Ultimately, the reason doesn't matter. And the reason why it doesn't matter is because I'm not going to change their mind. I've never in 24 years had an opportunity to share feedback with a candidate and say, hey, thanks for meeting with us. We went through this whole interview process. We asked some specific questions around X. We didn't get the data we needed. We didn't see enough strength in Y technology or whatever. Thank you for applying. Thank you for interviewing. Better luck next time. What do you do with that? Are you going to argue with me? You're going to tell me that I'm wrong? You're going to tell me the interviewers don't know what they're talking about? Are you going to demand a recount? The decision's not going to get overturned. So I can appreciate the frustration. And again, I'm sharing with you a very personal story because I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt. But we're not going to get a different outcome. Now, for me, I'm a big fan of forward momentum. All right, fine. Didn't work out. Not getting that job. And I've sat and cried over jobs that I didn't get that I really wanted. Not that one. There have been others, okay? True story. I understand that need to grieve and that need to maybe lash out privately with your friends, not on TikTok, please. I understand that desire to be really angry and hold it against an organization or a person or a team. And you can do that. You absolutely have every right to do that. Here's what I recommend you ask instead. And I have to put my glasses on for this. It's going to be really, got the blue light blockers on today, so it's going to be all very, ooh, okay. I have to see what I'm reading to you. Okay, so here's the deal. Forward momentum. I actually made a post about this a while back, so I'm kind of reading from that. If I'm still potentially interested in this organization, this is the key, because if this is a company that you're never going to talk to again, who gives a shit? But if it is a company where you're like, wow, they're pretty big and there might be a different division or there might be a new role or maybe in the future, those kinds of things. A lot of you know this. I interviewed with my current company 4 times in a decade. 4 times. We said no to each other at different times during that decade. But I'm just saying, if I had gotten salty about it and carried a grudge and, whatever, I wouldn't be in this job, which is the best recruiting job I've ever had, bar none. Just saying. Here's what I want you to ask instead. Would you recommend any other teams, roles, or levels tied to scope of work that I could connect with in the future? This is one of my favorite questions to answer as a recruiter is, okay, based on the information, I understand you can't give me feedback. Based on what you know, based on what you can share with me, should I pursue something different in the future? This also sets you up to understand if there's any kind of a cooling off period. I have a whole video on cooling off periods, so check that out. I'll link to that up above. And just understand, maybe I need to take a pause. Maybe I need to wait 6 months, get a little more experience, learn something, take a class, and then I'll try again in 6 months, or I'll try again in a year. I've talked before about Google's cooling off period. Now, keep in mind, I've been gone for a while, it might have changed, but when I was there, it was an automatic 1 to 2 year pause before you could re-interview. That's because Google interviews for the company. Now, there are circumstances where, hey, you're great for the company, but just not this job, and we're gonna, try to team match you somewhere else or whatever that happens. So again, understanding how a company thinks about talent acquisition, the rules, the processes, things like that in place is critical. So ask your recruiter, but understand, am I gonna be just spinning my wheels if I try again in a year or 6 months or next week? Just ask. Also, if I see a role, assuming that, I'm not in a cooling off period and I could come back in 6 months or whatever that looks like. For internal recruiters or even agency recruiters, I think you can ask this. If I see a role at your company, represented by your agency, whatever, that I want to learn more about, can I get back in touch with you? Yes. And let me tell you, I literally just last week, as of the making of this video, just last week, extended an offer, which I am happy to report was accepted, to a candidate who had actually pulled out of the interview process several months back. Something had come up. I don't remember the details now, but they were going to interview and then were like, wasn't the right time or something. Okay, fine. They called me up like several months later. Hey, I don't know if you remember me. I'm just checking in. I'm curious if there might be something. And it just so happened we were opening up a new role for the same team. And I was like, oh, this might be a quick win. And so we did all the things. Like, they still had to apply. We still had, other candidates that we spoke with and went through a thorough interview process and did all the things that we should do. Everything was above board. But we did end up hiring that person. So yes, there is value in keeping in touch. There is value in that follow-up, and there is definitely value in focusing on forward-looking information and insights. We cannot armchair quarterback decisions that have already been made. I don't personally hold any value in what Facebook might have said about me as a candidate several years ago for a very specific role and team at that stage of my career. I'm a different person now. They're a different company now. A lot of the players have changed. Expectations, I'm sure, have shifted on both sides, all of those things. It does not keep me up at night, y'all. And I don't want it to keep you up at night either. Forward momentum. Know where to put your emotional energy. And don't sweat the things that you cannot change. All right, y'all, I hope that helps. Check out the accompanying videos. I've got videos on rejection, feedback, cooling off period. I'll make sure that you have links to all of those down below. Good luck out there, and we will see you next week.